Hello and welcome to this Pali Studies tutorial, where we look at the grammar of the Pali language and occasionally at the grammar of English too. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the tenses of the English language. I have to admit, as a native English speaker, I didn't really understand what tense was. At school I was taught that English has three tenses: the past, the present and the future. But in actual fact, we can speak of up to 12 tenses in English, and that's just the active voice. So in this tutorial, we're going to look at time, aspect, and mood, and how they make up tenses in the English language. A tense is actually a combination of both time and aspect. We'll come to aspect in a second, but to locate an event in time isn't actually that complicated. We have what is true or happening now, what was true or happening before now, and what will be true or happen later. And we call these the past, the present, and the future. Perhaps a more general or sophisticated way to think of time is with reference to a fixed point. Usually this is the time the statement is being made. Then we call the past what happened before that point, and the future what was predicted to happen after that point. So when it comes to giving examples of this, it's common to use what's called the simple tenses, that is, without any reference to aspect or completeness. So we use the simple present to say maybe something that only happened once or is generally true, like, I eat fish. And I apologise to the vegetarians out there. And of course we can modify this to give some degree of frequency. I sometimes eat fish. The simple past talks about something which has already happened, obviously, but has definitely ended or is no longer true. So we can say, I ate fish, in that I ate fish when I was young, or I used to eat fish. The future is anything that hasn't already happened, but that we think will happen. There's actually two forms of the simple future in English: the will form and the be going to form. So I can say, I will eat fish, or I am going to eat fish. There is a subtle difference. Going to is used more often with things which are planned. Now the thing about the simple tenses is that they give little or no information about how the event actually progresses. To help understand what aspect is, let us think about the different sorts of things a verb can represent. It can stand for an action or an event, like I stand up. A process, like I am standing up, which is ongoing, or I have stood up, which is a completed process, or a state, I am standing. These statements are actually all about something happening now, but each communicates a slightly different meaning. And that's where aspect comes in. Aspect describes how an event extends over time, and all three time periods can be varied to give information about the duration of the event. So in English we can split aspect into two main classes: the imperfective and the pefective. The imperfective is generally used to describe ongoing events, whilst the pefective describes an action viewed as a limited or a single distinct whole, without any reference to the duration of time. Now, further distinctions can be made, for example, to distinguish ongoing actions from repetitive actions. So within the imperfective, we can speak of progressive, continuous, and habitual. But again, the differences are subtle, and it's quite common to conflate these terms and even use them interchangeably, especially the progressive and the continuous. And in this tutorial, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to treat the progressive, the continuous, and the imperfective as all the same thing. And within the pefective, there's also something confusingly called the perfect aspect, which is slightly different, but for now I'm just going to ignore it. Now often, these two classes of aspects are described as incomplete and completed. Though somewhat inaccurate, it's a good idea to bear these labels in mind as we look at them in more detail now. So if we take the imperfective aspect first, in fact let's call it the continuous as that actually makes some sense. Continuous here means an event that's ongoing. So the present continuous is an event which is both happening now and ongoing. For instance, I am eating fish. This doesn't mean to say that it will happen forever, but that it's underway or in progress. Saying I eat fish is not the same as saying I am eating fish. One is a statement of fact without further clarification, whilst the other is talking about an ongoing process. And again we can modify this for frequency, so I can say I am occasionally eating fish. The past continuous is slightly different. It's used to describe an ongoing event, but one which was interrupted. So I could say, I was eating fish when you called, or I was eating fish until the age of 7. Here the statement, I was eating fish, is like a background. It sets the scene for another event. Similarly, we use the future continuous to talk about things that might be interrupted in the future, or to predict what will happen at a specific time. And again with the future we have the two forms, the will form and the going to be form. So we can say, I will be eating fish for dinner, or I am going to be eating fish for dinner. Now, although a little inaccurate, we can say that the Pefective aspect relates to an unspecific time in the past, but where the impact continues relative to another event. So the present perfect connects the recent past with a present event. For instance, someone has eaten my fish, or I have just eaten fish. I have eaten fish for most of my life. Words like already, just, and yet are very common with this aspect. So the past perfect describes an event which had completed even earlier, one which took place before a specific time in the past, or before another action. So we could say, I had just eaten fish when I fell ill. Notice the difference to the past continuous, where an event already underway is interrupted, whereas the past perfect places a completed event before that interruption. Likewise, the future perfect expresses an idea that something will occur before another action in the future. It's used for activities or events forecast to be completed by a particular time. For instance, I will have eaten fish tonight. Finally, English allows the perfective and continuous aspects to be combined, and this is used to describe an action that started previously and has continued. So we use the present perfect continuous to show that something started in the past and has continued up until the present. For instance, I have been eating fish now for several days. Likewise, we use the past perfect continuous to show that something started in the past and continued up until another event in the past. So, I had been eating fish when you called. And we use the future perfect continuous to show that something has already started and will continue up until a particular point in the future. I will have been eating fish for a week by the end of today. And again, notice the difference to the continuous aspect. It's subtle, but the continuous aspect emphasizes interrupted actions, whereas the perfect continuous emphasizes a duration of time before something happens. Why did I choose eating fish? Okay, so if we now put these into a table, we can highlight some interesting things. Let's place time across the top and aspect down the side. And I am going to change the verb now. So let's use the verb to go. So the basic form of to go is I go, you go, he goes. and the past form of go is went. I went, you went, he went. And the future form is will go. I will go, you will go, he will go. Now the first thing to notice here is that English only has two morphological times. That is, the verb to go is inflected for time to indicate the past and also the non-past, which is the present but also the future. To indicate the future, we take the basic form of the verb, go, and add the auxiliary will. So we have the combination will go. This combining of verbs instead of inflection is called periphrasis, and we'll come back to this in a second. Now if we turn to the continuous aspect, we have I am going, you are going, he is going, I was going, you were going, he was going, and I will be going, you will be going, he will be going. So now there's a couple of things to notice here. With the continuous aspect, the verb is always in its present participle form, that is, the ing form. And even though it's called a present participle, it's used for all three time periods. The time period is actually indicated by the inflection of the auxiliary verb, and the auxiliary is always a form of the verb to be. So in the present time we have the present tense forms, and in the past we have the past tense forms, and the future takes will be. Now in the Pefective, I have gone, you have gone, he has gone, and in the past, I had gone, you had gone, he had gone, and in the future, I will have gone, you will have gone, he will have gone. Now a form of the verb to have accompanies the past participle, and again it's the auxiliary which indicates the time period. And finally, with the combination of the Pefective and the continuous, we get a form of the verb to have plus the auxiliary been and a present participle. So, I have been going, you have been going, he has been going. In the past, I had been going, you had been going, he had been going. And in the future, I will have been going, you will have been going, he will have been going. So, with the table now complete, we can point out another couple of features. And the first is that the verb to go only appears in 4 distinct forms. And these are usually referred to as principal parts, which are the basic form of the verb, the past form, the present participle, and the past participle. In English, the present participle is always easy to spot because it ends ing. So we have to go, went, going, and gone, or to eat, ate, eating, and eaten. These are called irregular verbs because the past form doesn't conform to any specific rule. With a regular verb, the past form is created by adding the suffix ed. And also with regular verbs, the past participle is often indistinguishable from the past form. But when participles are used as finite verbs, that is to convey an aspect and time period, they're always accompanied by an auxiliary verb. So the simple present is conveyed by the base form of the verb, and the simple past by adding the suffix ed. Although as we've seen in English there's many irregularities, and these are termed inflectional forms. But in English the future tense and the other aspects require auxiliary verbs. And this is termed periphrastic, which means several words are used instead of an inflection. So to create the future we combine will or shall with a verb, and participles always require an auxiliary, usually a form of to be or to have, to create an aspect. Now there's another important type of auxiliary verb called the modal auxiliary, and these are used with a verb or a participle to create a verb mood. So far, we've been looking at what's called the indicative mood, and this is the most common mood generally used for statements of fact. But other important moods are the imperative, which is used for giving instructions, the conditional, where something is said to be true if a condition is met, and the optative, which is used to express things which may happen. So in the simple aspect, we get I would go if, or I may go, and we can fill in the other aspects. Actually, there are quite a few modal verbs, and I'm just using would and may as examples. An important point to notice here is that it's just the indicative mood which indicates time period. The other verbal moods only have aspect, but follow the same rules that we've just looked at. And finally, we should look at tenses in the passive voice. In a previous video on the passive voice, I said that the passive is always expressed by a form of the verb to be and a past participle. Well, this is true in the simple aspect. So we can say, I am seen, you are seen, or he is seen, or in the past, he was seen, or they were seen, and in the future, I will be seen, you will be seen, he will be seen. Then in the continuous aspect, we have a form of the verb to be, plus being and a past participle. So we get, I am being seen, and in the past, I was being seen, and in the future, I will be being seen. But in the perfective, we have a form of the verb to have, plus been and a past participle. So we get, I have been seen, in the past, I had been seen, and in the future, I will have been seen. And although it's possible to form the perfective continuous, it doesn't really make that much sense, so I'm going to skip it here. So now we can take these formula that I've been giving you and put these in a table. I'm adding the ones from the active voice. So now we can see some more patterns. If a participle is used as a finite verb, and here I must stress we're only talking about finite verbs, participles do get used for other things, but if the main verb is in a participle form and it's accompanied by a form of the verb to be, which has been inflected for person, number, but also for time period, then if it's a past participle, it must be in the passive voice, but if it's a present participle, we've got a form of active continuous. It's probably worth noting here that with the simple active voice, you'll have a form of the verb itself which is inflected and no auxiliary. Now we can also see that all forms of the perfective aspect use the auxiliary to have, and the perfective continuous can be identified by its use of the present participle. In fact, the present participle only gets used for forms of the continuous aspect and in active voice. And with all the forms, except the active simple, it's the auxiliary verb which indicates the time period being expressed. Well, that was a quick run-through of tenses in the English language, and I know they can be quite confusing and awkward, so I hope these formula tables help you both identifying and forming the tenses. So to summarise, the key insight with all these different tenses is that each statement takes place at a specific moment, whether in the past, present or future. And the point of aspects is that they tell you, as of that moment, the status of the action. In total, they give us 12 possibilities in the English language.